Welcome to today's podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our dialogue. Today, Dustin and I dive into relationships in general and deep friendships in specific, just the relationships that have transformed our lives and the importance of our interaction with other humans, the reflection that we provide for each other, um, the benefit and growth that can be encountered even through discourse and friction with another person, and the amazing platform that humans provide for each other in this journey, specifically through relationship, and just the go deeper into the amazing benefits and nurturing potential of long-term relationships and deep friendships, and the ways that they can modify and enhance our lives, and how we can show up in that way for other people. We talk about the mindset of seeing the world as something that is happening for you instead of something that is happening to you, and the profound way that that can be incorporated into relationship and be seen as a way to show up and to be present and to be in the now with another person, whether that's a casual acquaintance or a deep lifelong friend. Just the incredible transformative shift that can create in our ability to be empathetic, to hear, and to genuinely respond to what's happening in another person's life, and really help shed the masks that we often have out of desire to be a good friend, to be good in relationship, whether that's as a spouse or a friend, a parent, a father, mother, teacher, whatever that relationship is. Just the incredible effect that our mindset and approach has around our ability to enter in and give and nourish out of that relationship, but also to receive. Just the incredible two-way dynamic that relationships are in our lives. And it is a fundamental part of our experience here as humans. Looking forward to jumping into this without further ado. So like those people that have known us from, pre-12 or something like that, like it's I think we're such an authentic version of ourselves at that age. There's no or minimal masks or trying to be something else, or haven't bought into or even, experienced what those different energies are. And it's just a very genuine interacting and discovery of life. And it's really neat to be able to connect with those people later, especially when we've gotten back to that place in life, back to the desire to have a genuine and authentic and courageous, vulnerable experience with life, and just be who we are. And I feel like it's a really neat seeing and being seen and reconnecting with those relationships that I imagine they're pretty, for most of us, there's probably not a lot of them, not a lot of people that we carry from pre-12 years old to into your 30s or 40s and beyond. It's pretty special. Just basking in that for sure. And I've seen that in you, like every time you've gone back home over the past couple months. Like it's just like you're radiating, when you come back, and just that aspects of that experience that are really hard to explain. But I love what you just said too. Like, do you repeat it? Like it's kind of like it's like family without like the karmic or.
Yeah, I said it's having friends this long is like having family without the genetic or karmic baggage,
Mm-hmm.
and is extremely nourishing.
Yeah.
You're gonna keep going?
No, that I was just like I think that captures it really well, and just I'm still in just a state of appreciation and observation of that. A lot of gratitude.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's there's something so unique about it. It's like, especially being on a spiritual path. I had some very interesting conversations with some friends over the last few days where it's someone who's not on the spiritual path versus someone who is, and the differences of approach. And I think I would put religious or spiritual path like over here, and then just neither path over here. It's just like, I'm just not interested in that. And I think for me, I think you're gonna really appreciate this. Like where I was when I was younger, and my memory has had this view of who I was, and I have a view of my evolution. And it's like, that's how I view my life unfolding. That's how I view my growth. That's how I view the benefits of a spiritual path. That's how I view, like, my evolution. And there's a really fun dichotomy here. So we're talking about old friends, and whether it's an ex from high school or a friend I've known since I was 7, there's things almost like our ego in ways that we don't know what it's doing. It's so humbling. But well, I'm like, I've been on a spiritual path for 10 years and I've grown so much. And I have. And things that I feel like I no longer do, or I wasn't always that way, or this is a newer thing, or whatever. And I've been humbled in some really humorous ways going to my hometown this year, where I would do something silly, or, we'd be cracking up or whatever. And I would think that was like, that was like a new trait or an unusual trait for me. And they're like, what do you mean? You have always been that way ever since I've known you for like 30 years, 20 years, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? And they're like, oh, you did that. Do you remember this? And I'm like, no. Like, do you remember this? I'm like, kinda. Do you remember this? Oh, yeah. And so it's like what we're saying, like the whole range of, it's so nourishing in a unique way. There's memories. And I've seen friends and I see their kids. Like, we weren't recording when I said this, but it's a part of that beautiful nourishment of connecting with people we've known a long time, and like the core of friendship. And this is one form of it where it's like gold. You've got memories, and I'm seeing their children, and I'm holding their children, and the way they move their face and their eyes and their nose and their expressions, or little idiosyncrasies that my friend or his partner are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what do you mean? You've done that since we were kids. And I always was aware of it. I probably never told you. It was just the way you moved. It was the way you tilted your head. It was the way your posture was, and the way you would say something, and like how you would communicate, even unconsciously. And I'm like, your kids are doing that. And they're like, what? And so it's all those things too.
Yeah.
But for me, one of the great joys is for me, I believe it's one of the core pillars of life is friendship. And I combine that with community. And we've talked about this before. It is one of the commonalities of the healthiest people that have lived the longest in this world, and some of the healthiest cultures I've seen.
Yeah.
And it's like this, I didn't plan on reconnecting with people from my hometown. My life took a lot of twists and turns in the last 6 months, and now I've been going once a month this year. And it's like, with no intention, I've reconnected. And like you said, with your friend, it's like, I saw him yesterday, and it's been years. And just even like we were in his kitchen, and he was looking at a glass. I won't say what he said. I don't want to get into all that, but the whole point, I want to respect his privacy.
Yeah.
If anyone knows who I'm talking about, is he just was looking at a glass and he said something, and it was something we would say as kids. And I hadn't heard him say that this year since we reconnected. And I lost myself. I was curling over. My abs hurt. I was crying, laughing. And he's a very composed man. He's a very composed man. It's one of the things I love about him. And he's we took the sensitivity test, and I'm like off the charts sensitive, and he's very, 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 very non-sensitive. And I'm saying that because to see him laughing the way he did, it was so unusual for his normal demeanor, even when we're, chuckling or whatever. And we were kids again. We were like 10 years old again. And it's such a unique frequency of laughter to have that history. And that's like, there's pure safety, pure familiarity. And I could go on and on, man, but it's like friendship, that flavor with that length of time, that trust is, you build it over decades and lose it in a second. There's that trust there. Like, wow, I've known you for 30-something years. I deeply trust you. You have not wavered on your principles and values, no matter what you've done in your life. That is in itself extremely nourishing and safe. And yeah, just on a soul level, it is nourishing in a way that's unlike anything else I've ever experienced.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and thank you for sharing that too. I think it's this is such a neat topic, and we have talked about relationship before, and do often in our conversations as well, just because it is such a, I think, a core, I don't want to say principle, like a core reality, a core human experience, and is deeply connected to our ability to find peace, to find happiness, to be connected to joy, to feel safety. I think it allows us to experience, creative sides of ourselves, courageous sides of ourselves in different ways when we don't have that support, we don't have that bonding that's happening around us. And just like what a profound part of the human experience is friendship. And and obviously it has levels and layers and time links and emotional and mental components, and there's a lot of variety to that, and I think there's worth in all of it. It's so neat to both of us recently experiencing reconnecting with relationships that we haven't been connected with in decades, in different ways, or at least not on this level, and just how nourishing and what a reminder that's been to apparently both of us. I don't want to speak for you, but like it feels like you were saying this too. It's just like how nourishing that is, and how supportive it is to be known by another and just loved and accepted, and just the freedom that exists within that relationship to celebrate, to participate in joy, to talk about whatever's coming up, as sticky or controversial or uncomfortable as it may feel inside. Like just the years in with that person, like allows a certain grace, a certain fluidity, of knowing that they're going to continue to love you and accept you, because that's what they've always done. And that's, I think that speaks to the trust you were talking about, and just how, I don't know. I think how vital that is actually, to our human experience and to having a healthy human experience. It's so supportive of growth, and change. And I think that's what's been so interesting too, because like you said too, we feel so different now than who we were 30 years ago. And in a lot of ways, we clearly are. Like there has been incredible growths and discoveries and journeys internally, relationally, physically, mentally, emotionally. But there's this really neat grounding piece when you reconnect with these friends, that they remind you that you are so similar and in so many other ways to exactly who you were when you were 10, 11, 12, 14. And like, you said that same shit then. And you had that funny little twitch when you were uncomfortable, or like, that's, whatever that is. And I think that's really neat, just reminding like our core self, like that we can be known, that someone has been paying attention, that, I think a lot of that happens on a subconscious level. And part of why it feels so nourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just I totally agree with that, man. I'm just thinking of so many examples of visiting these old friendships this
Mhm,
year, and just so many examples of that. Or I just like that silly side of me. I
mhm,
have a very core silly side,
mhm,
and it's not my deepest home base is that double Virgo, the slower, grounded, sensitive, just really aware side. Like that's more my home. And right next to that is my silliness. And like how that's come out and how
Yeah.
I'm more recently in life embodying my
Mm,
storyteller side.
mm.
Um and it was even a moment with my friends where I was depicting part of Matthew McConaughey's book, the one that you actually referred to me.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you again. That book was mind blowing. And I was talking about the part where Matthew McConaughey talks about the scene with his brother and his dad fighting in
Yeah,
his house,
yeah.
and where like his brother takes a 2x4 and hits his dad over the head, and he's like, "Dad, come on, stop fighting me. I don't want to." And we're hanging out in their kitchen, catching up as friends, and I'm depicting this story for whatever reason. I don't remember why I was telling them this part of the book, but I could see their expressions, and they were like, "God, I don't know who's telling this better, you or Matthew McConaughey," and like stuff like that, where it's like that vulnerable, courageous side of me to really show my essence and try to share my gifts and my skills and strengths and talents with the world. And I have people that have known me so long mirror it back. It's like my inner boy is just like, oh, thank you. And then the other parts where we're just being slapstick silly and it's super humbling and it calls me out on something. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I've been like that, I guess, since I was a kid. And I still have those elements, or just that safety piece, like you said. There's just that comfort. A moment I'd actually like to share, and since I'm not saying who these people are, if they listen, they will definitely know. It was so touching to me on a soul level, a human level, and it reminded me of my mother has always told me this in our family. She's always said it takes a tribe, it takes a tribe, it takes a tribe, and it's like you can't do it alone, you can't live life alone, especially just referencing the beauty of tribal communities that in our culture we've really gotten away from this in a lot of ways. And there was a moment with my friends where they were mowing grass, singing songs. It was beautiful. And my buddy's on a tractor, and they had like 9 yards of wood chips. I'm helping them do some landscaping kind of stuff, moving some stuff around. And they have two beautiful girls, and the 3-year-old, um, she was asleep in my friend's arms, and he, with no hesitation, right, 3-year-old, just like, hey, here, you want to hold her? And I was just like, oh, sure. Like it was like he was offering and he was asking me. It was like, here, hold her, but he wasn't really asking. He was like, here, hold her, because he had to go help his wife. And they have a beautiful piece of property, and I was standing there, and I was like, just holding this beautiful sleeping little child, not being a father. That just it did something to me.
Mm,
It did something to me, and it was very beautiful. Like nature, land, friendship, trust, family,
mm,
children, protection, loyalty, hard work, full authenticity, vulnerability, beauty. Like it
mm,
was all there. And I was holding, watching their family interact and on their land and looking up at the trees and the wind going through the trees and just holding this beautiful little sleeping girl in my arms. And I held her for almost an hour, actually. Um, and she was just conked out the whole time. And that was so beautiful. Like, and if I didn't have that friendship and that
mm.
trust, there's no way that would have happened. And there's so many beautiful elements of that nourished me in a way I don't think I've ever been nourished. That was a new level of nourishment, a new flavor of life's nourishment. I had not experienced that specific frequency of God or source or, life's a gift of, hey, here's a part of living this human experience. Check this out. And I just was like, whoa.
Mm.
Um, Not having children, I have a hunch that's probably something similar, though probably not nearly as powerful as what parents experience holding their kids in their arms. Um, and so, oh man, yeah. And then new friendships. Like there's a whole spectrum here, man.
Yeah.
of like all these gifts from old friendships to new friendships and the trust and the vulnerability that takes. And you are my deepest, newest, friendship. So it's cool talking to you about this,
Yeah.
about my oldest male friendship. It's a really beautiful synergy and dichotomy, but not in ways, which gets me to I'm kind of thinking like, what do you think? Answer this however it resonates, or if something else comes up. Like, what do you think is by thinking one of the like how have you cultivated friendships, or like what something like a kernel, a pattern, a learning, a lesson, like how do you approach it? What do you enjoy most out of it, or something along those lines? Does anything come up that resonates?
It's a really good question.
I'm thinking that for myself as well.
Yeah. I mean, nothing immediately, but I'm very interested in um, sitting with this for a second. I mean, I'm reflecting back on, I feel like the majority of my close friendships, there's been a bond almost immediately
Huh.
within the first few times of being around that person, either the way we approach something, um, the way they listen, the way they speak, the curiosity in that person. That's a pretty consistent trait of the people that I've been closest to anyway. It's just like their curiosity about life, about others. So I think like for the majority, there's been like an internal connection almost to that person that I couldn't really explain. That felt safe, that felt comfortable from the beginning. I mean, I can think of a few relationships that I have that are deep at this point that started much slower. Took a lot more time around each other, even years before we really developed a deep friendship. But that's definitely not the pattern. I think the pattern for me has been um, upon the first few encounters with this person, just seeing something being mirrored. And it would really, I mean, a lot of this language is newer for me. I wouldn't have spoken about it like this 10 years ago because I didn't have the language around the subconscious or energetics of mirroring or knowing another person or seeing a reflection or a correspondence in yourself and another. But I think that's been a huge part of it. I think there's something much more spiritual going on than I noticed for most of my life with the connection and who I've connected with and who's developed into those meaningful individuals in my life. And there, absolutely. And I'm sure you've had this too. There's been a few people who've had a profound impact on my life that have only been a part of it for a short time. And then have actually kind of exited, relationship for whether that was me or them or distance or where we lived or travel, whatever that was. But I'm really grateful that I'd say the majority of my relationships have been pretty long term or are multi-yeared. You were one of my newest relationships that participates on an extremely deep level. Like I meet people every day that I'm excited about and love, but there's often not well, yeah, I think our connection is pretty singular in my life in a lot of ways. Just our ability to dialogue, to encourage, and connect with each other on a meaningful spiritual level that is so nourishing and resonates. It really has been singular in a consistency way. I think I've found that in other people, even some of my older relationships, on and off. But it's been more seasonal. And not a right or wrong or good or bad. It's just like that's been an inherently consistent part of our relationship since we've known each other. We really initially got connected on a spiritual level, and we're both actively involved in in learning about who we were and helping and connecting with others. And that was like, that was the platform with which we encountered each other. And that's been a core tenet of how we continue to evolve and relate to each other. And it's fun to bring in some more of these other parts of our lives, like the humor, the silliness, because I feel like most of my relationships, those are often more present early on. Just whether it was sports or being a goofball, or I can think of a few friends that we literally connected at events just because of our, like, we were being, verbally expressing like our kind of commentary on what was happening around us, and just, got a kick out of how the other person like saw something or expressed something. And a lot of those early ties have been through wit or humor, um, or good questions. I mean, that's something that's really attracted me to people, and I think the curiosity is tied into that. Yeah, well said. So I don't know. I mean, I think the pattern that I've seen more than anything, to kind of 10,000 foot view, is like that there is something inherently spiritual and deeper connected in between these relationships. And often it's taken me years to see that. But some of that's changed just as I've become more grounded, more sensitive to that part in my life in every facet, and more open to just the depth of meaning behind things that I inherently can't perceive in the now. And how consistent that is within human relationship as well. And, for some, it's taken me years to see that, decades even, and others, like our relationship, that was forefront. And just knowing that there was something other going on than what met the surface, more than just enjoying being around you. Like there was a reason we met each other. And and I think that holds true of the majority, if not all, of my relationships. I just don't know that I'm that clear on being able to see it in all of them yet. But I think I think there's so much more going on than we perceive, and maybe more so within relationships than any other aspect of our life, because I think it is the one defining, necessary human experience is relationship. I mean, I think that's, in a broad sense, why we're here, and like that's what this experience is about. I know it's very general, but yeah.
I agree with that. You just reminded me, several things came up. The first one was a teacher. I'm forgetting his name, but I think is it Mount Gox, or what is it? It's an artist, or Mount Wolf. I have to find it on Spotify, but where they layer music in with like spiritual teachings, and I just love that. And it's one I've listened to more than anything. I used to listen to it every morning when I get up at 4, made my coffee. That's how I'd start my day for like a couple years almost. And in one of those teachings, he says, I'll have to find it and put it in the description on this one. He says, all we need is food, shelter, and companionship. But everything else is a bonus. And I just thought of that when you said that, and it's like, it is so key. And you reminded me of a funny moment with us to depict how that was opposite, like for you, and I guess partially for me, but where you're like, it usually started with wit and humor and things. And we started on this like deep spiritual connection, and we're in trainers training last year, and we're doing public speaking practice, and you were so funny, and I hadn't seen that side of you, and I was like, dude, where did that come from? You're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you were hilarious, man, like really, really fucking funny. And you're like, well, that's like a big part of me. I'm like, well, how come I haven't seen that? You're like, well, because we're in such deep spiritual conversations all the time, and I just had it come up, and I got such a kick out of that. Yeah, because you made everybody in the room die laughing. Like we were cracking up, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know you do. And like, so there's that. So I wanted to say that because that was just so funny. Uh, but yeah, man, and you actually touched on, that was the third thing. You touched on something that I was thinking about to ask, and you basically addressed it, I think.
Hmm.
I want to see if you want to add anything else to it, because I was going to ask you if you think there's a spiritual undertone to friendship. And so
Yeah.
you touched on that, and I was thinking of, and I know we're going to do a podcast on this pretty soon. I think I can feel it intuitively, of psychic abilities, channeling, mediumship, the 4 types of being a clair, where it's like I view everything from a spiritual, like, soul view most of the time. And it makes you think of Journey of Souls, that book, Many Lives, Many Masters, that book, and then friendship, because people talk about spirit guides or soul family or soul mates or twin flames and all these things, whether it's intimate or platonic. And I believe that there's a limited number of people in my life that I've met where, for me, I would say I know. My view of the world, I know for me, whether I've had evidence or it's intuitive. I'm like, this is not our first go. I know you from another time. And there is way too much unexplainable stuff going on here that defies any other explanation I have been exposed to. And there's probably 10 to 15 people in my life I could put in that category. You're one of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting, because it's like, I know I have a lot of acquaintances, and I don't think there's a spiritual, I mean, for the most part, connection, any agreement or anything that's just like, it's a part of being in the human experience. But then on a friendship level, so I would put blood family, like relatives, and then the family we choose, our friends, is some of them are part of my soul family, some of them aren't. So it's not all of them, but it's like, that's where I get this soul family from. And so I think for me, the most deepest friendship or human interaction, that nourishment, that teaching, because, man, have I been humbled and knocked off my high horse more times I can count. Hopefully I stop getting on that high horse. I think I do it less and less, but I know I still do it sometimes. I'm human, in human form. But it's the teachings, the nourishment, the whole spectrum. And so that's my belief. Like, it's all happening for us. Even all the discomfort that's happening for me, it's all a growth opportunity. So the whole spectrum of that is very beautiful when I look at it that way. And that's how I interact with the world around me. And that's how I make sense of inexplicable things, you being one of them, where it's just like, one thing you said, and then I want to hear what you have to say, is that was really interesting. I've heard 2 different opinions on this, where you said, I think, if I have it right, that most of your friendships, there was like an instant knowing, right? So I've heard, most of my life, I've used that same qualifier, awareness, as of like, oh, you pay attention to this. I've also, and I think this is more for intimate relationships, though, I've heard different views where they say, if you meet someone and you're sexually attracted and there's that intimate, and it's just like, it's so strong, run. I've heard that, and I was like, that's an interesting perspective. And I view it like, in one way, it's because our unconscious definition of love, there's so much baggage and underlying programs that, like, someone, like, it's going to be very uncomfortable. You're going to learn a lot. So it's like, what's the intention? To have a lifelong mate, to have it be really peaceful and enjoyable, or to have it be very chaotic and teach you a plethora of things? Your choice. But that's how I understood that other, like, run perspective. And I'm like, I'm thinking about that for years. But on the other side, getting back to what I think is mostly been my guiding compass in this is yeah, there's like a click. There's something I can't explain. And I can think of you, one, two, up to 10 people right now where that was the case. And it was just a knowing. It was a feeling, it was a knowing, it was a familiarity. There was just like a values, a soul alignment where just like all of a sudden these things just fall into place, and it's like, oh, that doesn't happen every day. I'm gonna pay more attention. And then it typically goes very well. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I appreciate first just what you said and sharing your understanding of that. I would concur. Yeah, there's nothing in that that really resonated with me. I think first I wanted to comment just briefly on that what you mentioned kind of toward the end about like the love relationships, and like having heard from some people, like when there's immense fireworks at first, like attraction, whatever else, like to run. I don't think I've ever heard that. That's really interesting. That's I think an alternate view than I've really thought of. I don't. Part of it, I'm just out of interest. Like I was just curious and like talking about that more.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to have been in and still am in an amazing relationship. We've been together 18 years or more, and so like there's parts of that just like I haven't thought about in that way from my viewpoint thing. Like I work with people all the time who are in relationships, going through struggles, going through attraction, like developing relationships, and so like I feel like I've had much more of an observational view of the origin of those relationships for a long time, because I've been in one for a long time, and I know there was an immense amount of energy around trying to figure that out up until meeting her. It's just been a while since I've thought about it from my own perspective of what that internal exchange, what that internal feeling was on finding those people. So that's really interesting that people that say that, or that that's a guiding principle for some, and that is really interesting, because I would definitely say my experience, similar to what it sounds like yours has been contrary to that in relationships, in deep friendships. There has been a more of a knowing, a resonance, a comfort, and even excitement around meeting somebody, just like feeling seen, feeling known, more than the time you've spent together or the communication you've expressed with each other would really allow for. That there's just something deeper there. And I think, again, like we've noted this a few times, but like my language around this has definitely changed over the years. Not necessarily my experience, but how I understand it and how I speak to that. And at this point in my life, I would say there's a deep spiritual component to all of our relationships. I think the positive ones and the negative ones, like are the ones that we view in those different lights. Because I think, like everything in life, like things are phasal, things are seasonal, and we can experience something as positive now that can shift, and vice versa. But I've felt much more consistently that awareness of there's just being something more that I couldn't really understand or couldn't really speak to, and have continued in relationship with that person, and more often than not, I just found an immense value, immense opportunity for growth, for joy, for celebration, for experiencing things together. I think just on a broad sense, I think an incredible part of our time here, our journey here in the physical human experience is knowing ourselves and understanding that, loving, seeing the worth, seeing the value in who we are, and coming to terms with ourselves. I think is a way somewhat expressive that seems a little cold and distant, and to me, as far as like how intimate I think the spiritual journey actually is with ourselves and with others. and how nourishing and beautiful, how full of immense beauty and grace relationships can actually be, starting with ourselves and then with others. But that, but the only way that we can know ourselves, like in my understanding at this point, is through relationship, is through the mirror provided by other people, and that happens with everyone, and that happens with a clerk at the grocery store. That happens in somebody who hires me for independent contracting. That happens in every experience with another human. Like there is a mirror there for who we are and how we're showing up and reflecting that. And I think obviously like the deep relationships and friendships are a subset of that. Like that's a mirror that we're around for a more prolonged time, a reflection that hopefully we are much more comfortable with or excited about participating with. I know that a lot of us have people in our life that reflection is uncomfortable. Like there is somebody that is a deep part of their life, whether that, I think often it's family or family of people we've chosen to be in our life. Maybe not our immediate family, but someone else we love's immediate family has often been my experience in like those relationships that are prolonged and ongoing, but just hard, challenging. Like almost every encounter, there is some type of friction or dis-ease with that person. And I think those, though in my life they've often been shorter relationships than the ones that are edifying and nourishing from the start. Like I've learned so much from that as well, because it's triggered so many questions in myself and so much curiosity around, often initially, why they're showing up that way. And that's just me historically coming from historically a more judging other person's fault perspective into a more modern last decade or so of owning that and seeing my own reaction, just like then asking myself like, what's in me that's causing this friction? What's in me that's causing this reflection of myself that I don't enjoy, that I don't feel bolstered by. And that's led to I think a lot of interpersonal depth and also really, I think it greatly influences and helps me appreciate the relationships that are just predominantly nourishing, predominantly edifying and exciting. But I think there's a fundamental worth in all of that, and I'm increasingly aware that there's more going on than that I'm tapped into at any given time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, man. Yeah, it gets to me. One of the things you mentioned reminds me of the teaching of we've talked about this before, but it's like everything that that makes us uncomfortable, there's a teaching within it. Everything in life's happening for us. Everything that's enjoyable is also teaching us and nourishing in a way. It's just more comfortable. And I love it. Even a lot of the spiritual teachers, I mean, most of them, Abraham Hicks, we're just talking about her, and it's the same thing. It's like things we were taught in Empowerment Inc. Even things, it's just, I hear it teacher after teacher after teacher after teacher, and it's in alignment with what I believe is everything's happening for me. Everything. There is no exception.
Yeah.
We have agency, we have choice, and still everything's happening. And the video I watched with Abraham Hicks, someone we know showed me the video. I watched it, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? And there is a very miserable, grumpy man in the audience, and the video starts with him. He's got like his hat on. He's not looking at the cameras. He actually asks them to turn. He's like, you guys are filming me. I'm not comfortable. This is annoying. I mean, just negative, grumpy. And it was like a 20-30 minute video where she's channeling.
27, yeah.
You've seen that, right? Okay.
Yeah, I give it
You
to...
gave it to that person? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So it came from you. I didn't even know that, actually. That's pretty cool. And so you know the video, but for anyone listening, there's essentially a man bringing up genocide, Holocaust, just the atrocities of the world. And he's so focused on that. And he's so grumpy. And he said that he wanted to go to one of Abraham Hicks's events. If you don't know who she is, for anyone listening, she's a channeler. She's a medium. Joe, you know more about her than I do. But she's become kind of famous in a sense for being in this role of service to the world with that skill set or ability. And there's a guy in the audience just super grumpy. And so they have basically a one-on-one dialogue. And it's just the whole audience is just quiet, watching. And it's going on and on and on. And she's channeling and acknowledging the guys. Like, I don't disagree with you. There's a lot of shitty stuff that's happening. And it has happened for centuries. And the guy just is stuck. It's like he's stuck. He's angry. He's miserable. And it almost seems like he's picking a fight. It's like, I'm still not, I have some idea of why I think he was actually doing what he was doing at a deeper level. But he was just picking a fight just to pick a fight. I just want to complain and I want someone. It's like, I don't even know what he was looking for, but her responses were so beautiful. And that's what I'm thinking of, where it's like, I don't disagree with you. Everything in life's happening for us. You have agency in the choices you make and what you choose to focus on. And then what you and I have talked about from other teachers, where focus goes, energy flows. What we focus on, we create more of. The law of attraction, manifestation, quantum meditation, like all these things, guided imagery, visualization, subconscious mind. What we focus on, what we see, what we think about, that habit literally creates our reality.
Yeah.
In the third dimension. It just does. And it's one of the things I've talked a lot about, especially with clients in the last 3 years, is some people have a really, really, really hard time accepting that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, and that's what the guy in the video was saying. Well, what about this? And there's always like a but. And it's like, how do you get a person that's like, I'm not fulfilled in life. I'm very upset. I'm not enjoying life. I'm in a lot of negative emotions and limiting beliefs. And I am so 100% believe what I'm telling you. And it's like, I kind of want to budge, but I don't. I just want you to agree with me and accept how miserable everything is. And I love how she did it. She's like, it's your choice. That is a part of the human experience. If you focus on it, it's just all you're going to see. And you're not going to have the awareness to see other because you're so stuck in that. That's literally, you have blinders on. And all this joy is happening over here. And you're like, nope, everything sucks. That's still happening. And this is still happening for you. Agency, choice.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a very, just an empowering thing. I don't even know how we got across talking about that, honestly, but I think it's so empowering and important. It has been in my life. And I notice the more I live that way, the more empowered I come, the more things I manifest, the more great people come in my life, the more abundant my life is financially, health-wise, relationships, career, purpose. It just, I have my moments. I'm human. I grow, I slip, I fall, I learn, I get better and better, but I'm a staircase. I'm still going up. And it's all rooted in that way of living.
No, that's incredible. Thanks for bringing that up. I think how we got onto it is just like the realization and the understanding that relationships, all of them, are happening for us, not to us. Like, regardless of whether we see them as wonderful or see them as challenging. And that was a really neat, I think, tie-in and description. I think that video came up in my life, like, I guess a week and a half ago, out of another conversation with someone in a relationship they were having, and someone in a similar situation of conceptually and habitually that has a very open mind, spiritually focused, has habits around participating in that aspect of their life with prayer and meditation and different things, excited about that connection, but has become focused on the negative despite that, in spite of that, like the season that they're in, is one of, this is happening to me instead of this is happening for me. And once those blinders of like, this is happening to me starts to happen, like what we, as you said, where our focus is, like that's what expands. Like we just start to see more and more stuff that we don't feel like we have agency, that we don't feel like we have control of, that we don't feel like people are benefiting from, even though we have no conscious understanding of what someone else's experience in that, even in something as atrocious as genocide. I mean, that was one of the things, as you mentioned, that he brought up. But once we start to focus on that, we'll never be able to see how that could possibly be happening for us, for them, for this experience. And I think that was a really neat encounter and really neat. Well, we can link it in this video. If someone hasn't experienced Abraham before, that's diving in pretty intensely to how she interacts with people. But just encourage anybody to just have curiosity around it. Just welcome people to leave like how they've understood life or what their frames around what is plausible. Just leave a window for other in that when experiencing that, and just appreciate the benefit. And I think something that was profound in that, and this is huge in relationships too, is just how consistent Abraham was with truly hearing him. Yeah. Reflecting that back, appreciating what he was saying, understanding his point of view and his experience, not agreeing with, but understanding, seeing where that's coming from, seeing how you could get there, and how heavy that could be to carry that, and simply offering another perspective, an alternative perspective to that. And I think that's such a model for how I desire to show up in relationship, in life, in coaching, in friendship with you. And in that, not solving, not trying to fix, but like truly hearing where the other person is, where they're coming from, and having empathy. And if there's opening, if there is actually desire on that other person, offering an alternative, offering a potentially one of the many other ways that we could experience that we could see that. And I think that's one of the most powerful potentials within relationship, to pour into each other's life, to build that trust, to hold that security, to be seen and allow ourselves to be seen by others, because we're not coming from a place of judgment. We're not seeing the other as broken and trying to fix them. We're not discounting someone else's experience or perception or understanding of where they are in life. And just, I have an increased and continually increasing, I think, respect for how profound the life view of this is happening for me, not to me, actually is. Like that is, it is so wildly different than how most of us show up for life. It's so wildly different than how I showed up for a large part of my life. And it's been transformative. And it is no small habit, because it becomes that, and has to be that, of choosing to see life as this is happening for me. But how many other options and how many other answers it's given me to every solution, every situation in life, every difficult point, and how much space it's allowed within me to hold a situation before I react to it, before I freak out about it, before I cut off a relationship with somebody, before I alter the course of my life and somebody else's, because I'm reacting to something that's potentially intensely uncomfortable. It is it's an incredibly profound worldview and ethos to show up with, and the more I choose it, I think the more I see how other it is.
Here, man. I feel you on that. And I wanted to, before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to thank you for saying all that, because I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said, and it's the core of my approach to living. And I think tying that back to friendship as well is, in my experience, one of the things of all my travels and the different cultures and languages I've interacted with people in is a pattern of, it's so rare that people are understood and seen. And it's what most people are seeking. And even in a lot of the friendships that I have spoken to people about that they have or I have had, that's still shockingly lacking, even in family. Sometimes, especially in family, which is interesting. I would say actually more often in family. It just depends on the dynamic. So I would say sometimes, actually. But we all want to be seen and heard and understood. And so that part, you and I have talked about this a lot, like seeking to understand, and how useful and nourishing that is with everybody. I remember my brother, I don't think he would have any issue with me sharing this. Years ago, when I started my spiritual path, I started doing this instead of just voicing my opinion. It's interesting. I've wavered through this as I've been growing, and sometimes I deviate from it for certain reasons, but I always come back. In the last like 8-10 years, always come back. My brother told me when I started doing it, it was so strange and different from how I normally communicated with my family. And I remember he even said, like, when I started my spiritual path and started growing, he was like a couple years into it or something. He's like, yeah, I thought it was weird. I thought you were like freaking out, having like a quarter life crisis. I'm paraphrasing. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But he was like, yeah, I was cautious and concerned and confused. You were changing so rapidly. I didn't know if it was good or bad for you, honestly. And it was uncomfortable, and it was other, it was different, it was strange. But he's like, now I see, and this was, I don't know, 7 years ago or something. He's like, now I see how beautiful and positive it is. And one of the things that you've been doing is you say, are you just sharing or expressing yourself, or do you actually want feedback? And like I said, I've wavered with that, whether professionally, personally, it's like everything's evolving. And but I never forgot that. And it's like he so appreciated that. And he's like, I'm actually starting to do that myself now because of you doing that with me. And it just creates a safety. It creates a space. And so I love that part about just interacting with humans, but especially with those closer to us, because that often is more difficult to do the more we care as humans. It's a weird paradox. And it's so beautiful though. Like, it's rare. It's important. I think it's a very positive thing. And I've gotten beautiful feedback, which connects to us doing this podcast. Whether people listen to this podcast, people came on this podcast, or people I've spoken to just in my personal life, actually professionally as well. Or maybe I'm personally considering having them on this podcast with us. There's a theme that ties back to the way you and I are living and speaking. And I think what it's so beautiful about this approach is that multiple people have said, either there's very few or no one else in my life I can speak to like this. That's a growing amount of people that are saying that to me. And that's one of our dynamics that I really appreciate, because it's rare. And once you've experienced it and you embody it, your desire to be around people that aren't living that way shrinks a lot. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's it's noteworthy. I kind of mirroring back what you said. I agree with that, and it means a lot to me. So yeah,
This has been amazing.
yeah,
Thank you again
yeah,
for
me too.
just the conversation, and that continues to enlighten and intrigue me, like, curiosity, and just feels amazingly nourishing as well. And I just like I also appreciate that aspect about our relationship, and just the desire to understand the other, the desire to know where someone's coming from. And I loved your example that you just gave, speaking of stepping into that, and that time in your life where you did start to transition into that, not only that desire to understand somebody, but actually providing and giving space there, and even offering the question at times: is this something that am I just a sounding board here to just receive and hear you? Are you actually looking for comment or feedback or observation? And just how unique that is, and not something that is often modeled for us. And I think you and I have both been incredibly, profoundly even, impacted by individuals in our lives who have done that. I think that's the reason that we do it now and desire to live in that way, is the impact of teachers and mentors and people in our lives, that even friends, uh, that have shown up in that way, and just how impactful that can be. And I think that's, I don't know that there needs to be a lesson from this podcast, but like, I think like that's a neat takeaway from friendships in general, is just how much we can offer another human by just desiring to understand them, desiring to hear them, not to judge, to fix, to alter, but just genuinely hear. And just what a incredible intention that is to have with another human. And it'll change your life as well. Like, it'll change the person doing its life as well as the receiver. And I think that's an incredible thing about relationship, is just how two-way it is, whether we always see it that way or not. No, I'm just.
I want to.
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. Are we done?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to add to that. It's so beautiful. What you just said made me think of it as, it's both ways. You're not just, it's like the nourishment I get from doing that to people. I don't do it all the time. And to be fully transparent, I slipped up with you once, and we had to work through that. Maybe more than once, but I slipped up at least once. And it's like, that's not comparing what can happen when I don't just let someone be themselves all the time, or most of the time I humanly can, compared to when I don't. Like, when I do it, I'm nourished.
Yeah.
And it's like home. It's peaceful. It's like I'm sitting back against a tree in nature that's like hugging me. The temperature is perfect. There's no trying to change anything. I feel one and in flow with life around me and that person. I feel nourished in that I've honored them and uplifted their soul or their heart, or given them some beauty in that experience in their life, in that day, in that moment. And uplifting them, I feel at peace. It feels like home. And it's easier, actually, paradoxically. It's easier.
It is.
There's so much less effort. And then people are so used to, even when they speak, someone's already thinking of something else or how they're going to respond. They're not even listening. And it's like, being a good listener is rare. Being able to then communicate and give someone the space to, like, what are you desiring out of this interaction? Like, it's getting out of our own way. We're thinking of other and not ourselves. And that is so nourishing. You saying that just created that, which I think is a beautiful gem. I don't know if I've ever actually said in my life, which is kind of cool. And it seems like you feel the same just by your sensory acuity.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. I think that's a beautiful point and summation of of what's happening there. And I think you probably noticed too, like I was just almost teared up, like even speaking of it, just remembering, just being conscious of the effect that's had on my life when others have shown up that way, and when I've shown up that way, and it is so beautiful. And you spoke to this and what you just said too, like it's getting out of our own way. It's a being there with that person instead of like, I know we talk about this a lot, and we only do because I think it's incredibly important, but just the different types of energy, being, doing, and having, and culturally, experientially, like we spend so much time doing. And we spend so much, this plays out in relationship. We spend so much time doing relationship, the activity of relationship, trying to show up as a good friend or a good partner or whatever, and thinking about what our response is as the other person is talking. Thinking of questions we could ask, why someone's answering the last question we asked instead of listening. Thinking of a witty, smart, intelligent thing we could say to show this person how much we care while they're talking and we're not listening. And just how much, paradoxically, as you said, how much easier it is to actually be there, to actually listen, and to natively respond as you would respond once you've actually heard that person. And you don't need to know that until you get there.
Exactly.
Yes. Until you're in that moment. And that is being. It's part of the presence process. It's part of being in the moment. And it's no judgment. It's just not something that was modeled for most of us. It's not something I realized was an option for decades of my life. Same. I think I had glimpses of it because there were occasionally individuals in my life that did show up that other way, that were present, were in the moment with me, were just listening and responding to what they actually heard. And I remember times like walking away from those conversations, just being like, something was different. Like, I don't really know what was different there, but like something was different. Like I felt heard. I felt like they didn't necessarily say like a solution or like do this or quote, some movie or some book or some teacher. They just heard me. And I remember like what a profound effect that had on me. I think that my curiosity around that was a lot of, what led into even understanding that was an option, or more than an option, a way of being. Can become a habit. And so I know we've brought that up before, but I think it's, I need to continue reminding myself also, like the importance of that energy and being present.
That was gold. That was gold. Pure gold. I think that's a perfect place to end this, man. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation.
Thank you too, man.
Yeah.
Talk
Till
soon.
next time.
Yep.